Okay, I invite members who are leaving the chamber to do so as quickly and as quietly as possible as we move on to the final item of business, which is a members' business debate on motion 17484 in the name of Beatrice Wishart on radio teleswitch service switch off. The debate will be concluded without any questions being put. I'd encourage members wishing to participate to press the request to speak buttons now or as soon as possible. And I call on Beatrice Wishart to open the debate around 7 minutes. Ms Wishart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I'm sorry not to be in the chamber in person to join you this evening. Thank you to members who supported the motion and who plan to speak this afternoon. Thank you too to organisations who provided briefings ahead of the debate and to those I've met with over the past few months about the serious infrastructure failing. I know that Citizens Advice Bureau across the Highlands and Islands are working hard to help people through this change, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to them all, including the Shetland Bureau and the other organisations doing the same across the country. There are just 40 days to go until the nationwide radio teleswitch service, or RTS, switch-off deadline of 30th of June. But frankly, Presiding Officer, where we have got to with the RTS switch-off is depressing, frustrating and entirely avoidable. It is, in my view, a national disgrace. While this could be considered a purely reserved matter, based on the latest figures, it could impact around 125,000 Scottish households, including 22,500 in Glasgow and just over 17,000 in Edinburgh. I urge local authorities and local resilience partnerships to ready themselves for any potential adverse outcomes of the RTS switch-off, which may include thousands of homes without heating and hot water. RTS was a revolution when developed in the 1980s as a means to switch electricity meters between different tariff rates at different times of the day, allowing for the cost-effective and efficient use of storage heaters. The signal to switch between timings is broadcast by the BBC, which has had a long-standing arrangement with the Energy Networks Association to transmit a tele-switching signal on the BBC Radio 4 long-wave frequency. Support for the RTS signal will end on 30th of June, a date that's already been pushed back at least twice, and the technology that supports the signal is reportedly already well past end of life. It also means it could stop working at any time, so there is a chance of disruption to the service ahead of the deadline. The RTS and Radio 4 longwave signal shutdown's been on the cards for a decade now, and it is completely unacceptable that households which rely on RTS for their heating and hot water are currently left in limbo. The solution, exchange RTS meters, sounds simple, but for many years, Presiding Officer, constituents have been contacting me, and I know other MSPs, about both the lack of engineers and the lack of connectivity to switch an RTS meter to a smart meter. Even replacing a broken meter has been fraught with difficulties over the years. We've been promised technological fixes in advance of the switch-off, yet here we are at the 59th minute of the 11th hour, still finding that there's been limited development in technology or greater connectivity to the smart meter signal. With meter exchanges at the rate they are going, it will take over a year for all remaining RTS meters in Shetland to be exchanged, including the Shetland Parliamentary Office meter. Another short extension of the deadline won't solve the issue, and if the switch-off is in autumn or winter, the problems it will cause would be exacerbated by cold weather. As things stand, energy companies must increase their efforts to exchange all outstanding meters ahead of the deadline, but it's still unclear what will happen when the signal is turned off and the RTS meter hasn't been exchanged. Storage heaters and systems that heat water may remain off, leaving thousands of households in the cold. They may also remain switched on, bringing concerns about what could happen if heat continues to build in them. We simply don't know. For thousands of households, this is a very stressful time, and there's a disproportionate impact in the Highlands and Islands, places with high levels of fuel poverty, in colder parts of the country which rely on heating all year round, including in summer, with low levels of insulation in homes, reliant on oil or electricity for heat and power, and no connection to the gas network, and engineers few and far between. It cannot be acceptable for energy companies to leave their customers without power, heat and hot water. Nor is it acceptable that customers should be left in the potentially dangerous situation of systems possibly overheating. Energy companies are responsible for ensuring that their customers' meters are changed over from the old RTS system. Companies across the market have not covered themselves in glory during this period. Variable levels of responses to their customers on the issue and an insufficient number of engineers. OVO Energy is the main energy supplier in Shetland, and their lack of an informed and efficient customer service has taken up an inordinate amount of time and capacity within my office team, who have supported many constituents through this shambles. OVO's performance since it took over the domestic customers of SSE shows that it was not set up to take on the task it faced in rural and island areas, and its failure to retain local engineers has come home to roost in this period ahead of the switch-off. Customers have been let down, waiting at home all day, only to find out their engineer didn't arrive because they didn't properly prepare for the logistics of island travel. Just this morning, I heard from a constituent in one of the North Isles of Shetland who had waited over a month for the only appointment that was available to him from OVO, but after staying at home all day yesterday and without explanation, no engineer turned up. We learned this afternoon that the engineer hadn't booked himself onto the ferry to get to the island, and it was full with no spare capacity. The constituent has complained to Ofgem, who has also, until recently, been missing in action in this debacle. OVO was in Shetland in March and engaged face-to-face with local stakeholders as well as local customers, and even after that, they are still failing their customers. And OVO, along with other energy companies, have sent teams of engineers north in this so-called spring surge in a bid to exchange meters ahead of the deadline. It's too little, too late. Customers are paying the price for this. Scotland-specific targets have been removed in place of generic UK-wide rates, and tariffs vary by company. Questions still go unanswered about whether households will be stuck on higher rates after the switch-off, and they will be unlikely to want to do battle yet again with the supplier to change tariffs, but why should they be stuck paying a higher rate? And if heating is jammed on, how long will it take to notice, fix, and make sure the right tariff isn't reinstated? There simply shouldn't be this much uncertainty so close to a nationwide shutdown of technology. At the Spring Scottish Liberal Democrat Conference last month, I put forward a successful motion with practical steps to better prepare for the switch-off. Urgent action is long overdue. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much, Ms Wishart. We move to the open debate. I would advise the Chamber there's a lot of interest. I'm going to have to ask members to stick to their speaking time allocation. I call first Eleanor Whittam to be followed by Tim Eagle. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Whittam.
Officer, I thank Beatrice Wishart for bringing this important and urgent debate to the Chamber today, and I fully support her motion. The RTS switch-off is of a great concern for people across the UK, but the impact is particularly acute for those in rural communities such as my Carrickcumnock and Doon Valley constituency, where many homes are off Maine's gas grid and where there remains many socially rented homes with electric heating tied to such antiquated technology. With Scotland having nearly 135,000 RTS meters, we are set to be hardest hit by the change per population share. And we know from the briefing provided by the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, they are also very concerned for those tenants who are disproportionately impacted. Let me share an experience from one couple who contacted me. They have an older style meter which uses RTS to supply their heating, electricity and hot water. They were contacted by Scottish Power in August last year to inform them they were eligible for a smart meter. They diligently booked their appointment, but this was then cancelled by the engineers at the last minute, as it was decided that their meter would not be compatible for a replacement. They tried again, another appointment booked, and then another cancellation. Then absolute radio silence, no updates and no solutions. This then led to my office becoming involved. An appointment has now been set for June, which is really close to the switch-off date to replace the couple's meter, but understandably, they're really worried if this will actually finally resolve the situation, given the complexities so many have faced when engineers arrive to discover the existing setup has too many cables for them to be able to complete the swap out. And this seems to be a common denominator, too many cables in these old meters. If there is no fix, the couple will either have no electricity or hot water come the switch off, or they will be forced to pay a higher rate as the meter defaults to a higher rate without any applicable discounts. Or, as we've heard from Ms Wishart, maybe the heating will be stuck on actually in a house, without any respite from heating continually on. Even if they're able to have their meter replaced, Scottish Power are unable to assure them that they will stay on their current tariff. And this goes against Ofgem's pledge that no customer should be worse off as a result of the change. And we've already heard today stories like this are repeating themselves across the country, where members of the public have been doing their best to prepare themselves but have experienced constant pushback which is out with their control. Suppliers and consumers are now facing a ticking time bomb ahead of an ever-nearing cut-off date. Unfortunately, I and many of the people that I've heard from have no confidence that this will go smoothly. Beatrice Wishart referred to it as a shambles, and I think it absolutely is. That it is completely unacceptable, and the UK Government and Ofgem have to take action immediately. The switch-off date needs to be postponed, or there needs to be assurance that anyone who is financially impacted will receive full compensation. I do welcome the fact that the Minister for Climate Action has said that the Scottish Government will do everything it can within its limited devolved powers to mitigate the impact. But ultimately, we know that this is a reserved issue, and the UK Government must take responsibility and control and step up to the plate to ensure no one is negatively impacted by this change. And I also agree with Beatrice Wishart that local resilience partnerships really should be preparing themselves for what may happen come this shut-off. With households across the country already struggling financially with the cost of living crisis and economic uncertainty, this really is the last thing that they need to be dealing with right now. And it's especially urgent given the number of individuals with such meters who are already in poverty and dealing with unrelenting fuel poverty. I hope that the Chamber can be united today to send a clear message. This situation cannot be allowed to spiral any further. Action is needed urgently to protect our constituents and give them the peace of mind they deserve.
Thank you, Ms Whittam. I now call Tim Eagle to be followed by Pam Duncan-Glancy. Up to 4 minutes.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And I am very grateful to Beatrice Wishart for securing a debate on what is becoming an increasingly serious issue for many of the reasons that have already been mentioned. Some time ago, I realised that the 30th of June deadline would be too soon for many residents across the Highlands and Islands region and indeed other parts of rural Scotland. As Beatrice Wishart rightly identified in her motion, there are a lack of engineers on the ground, which is preventing the rapid switchover from RTS to smart meter devices. Now, I'm sure that every MSP that represents island communities will know that whether it is installing broadband, fitting new insulation, or making the switch to a smart meter, every supplier will only send a contractor to an island if there are several jobs to complete and if there is overnight accommodation available for their contractors. This is increasingly difficult in summer months as accommodation books out in advance, and I know this problem all too well from other active constituency casework. The number of households in the Highlands and Islands yet to make the switch from an RTS meter to a smart meter is staggering. Data supplied to me by Ofgem in February showed that there were more than 36,000 RTS meters still in operation across the Highlands and Islands. For context, this amounts to around 4% of all active RTS meters that remain in operation across Great Britain, despite the Highlands and Islands accounting for fewer than 1% of dwellings in Great Britain. Now, I realise that Ofgem have taken this task seriously, and I welcome its commitment to rapidly increase the pace and number of RTS upgrades through targeting regions where RTS meters are most prevalent. But according to the Citizens Advice Bureau, many people in rural and islands communities face an acute challenge in trying to secure a smart meter installation. This includes one elderly couple in their 80s from a rural community who repeatedly contacted their energy supplier after receiving a letter about the switch-off and have yet to secure a meter engineer visit. Also, according to the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, its members have stated that energy suppliers do not have the capacity to switch all RTS consumers for whom a smart meter will be appropriate by the 2025 deadline. Given that the UK have already delayed its digital switchover for landline phones from December 25 to January 27, there is surely a case for a similar delay to the RTS switch-off to ensure every household is able to upgrade. However, even though for those lucky enough to secure a smart meter, issues with unreliable broadband and mobile connectivity have seen smart meter connectivity issues, with Citizens Advice Scotland reporting the loss of heating in some instances as a result. That probably can't have been helped by the SNP government's failure to deliver its R100 broadband rollout, now almost a decade on from when the promise was first made. When I last asked for R100 data earlier this year, the SNP government confirmed that not a single property in the Western Isles had been upgraded to superfast broadband under the scheme. I think I've got time, yep.
Cabinet Secretary, briefly.
Expecting to talk about R100 today, but we have activated 55 4G masts in areas where economic factors and challenges meant it would have been unlikely. Now, these are areas that would never have had those upgrades if it hadn't been for the R100 programme. So we accept that if we hadn't done the R100 programme, we'd be talking about an awful lot more constituents.
Tim Eagle.
Actually talking about what has been done, I'm talking about the fact that it's not been rolled out to the deadline that the SNP had previously promised. And I wasn't even trying to make a particularly political point on that. The point I was making is that the Western Isles haven't seen any upgrades to this, and it is required for some of these meter upgrades. Across my region, more than 21,000 premises are yet to receive an upgrade. There's your further answer, including more than 3,400 in Murray. Deputy Presiding Officer, it is evident that many households and businesses will not meet the June 2025 deadline, and many people could therefore face an energy cliff edge. I call on the UK Government and Ofgem to consider a delay to the switch-off date so that households across Scotland, including in rural and island communities, can catch up. And similarly, I call on this SNP Government, who have the devolved responsibility of rolling out broadband infrastructure, to ensure there are no more delays to those vital upgrades. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Eagle. I now call Pam Duncan-Glancy to be followed by Emma Harper. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Duncan-Glancy.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and thank you to Beatrice Wishart for securing this debate this evening on an issue that affects people across Scotland, from Glasgow to the Shetland Isles. Figures from Ofgem show that as of the 18th of April 2025, there were still 22,579 radio teleswitch service metres in the Glasgow region. In the fortnight running up to the 18th of April, just 808 metres had been replaced. With some quick mental maths working at the same rate, it would take just over a year for my constituents who are still using the radio teleswitch service to have new metres installed. This would be too late for the thousands of constituents whose RTS metres will be switched off in just 6 weeks' time, which succinctly demonstrates what Age Scotland has called in their briefing a looming crisis. So thank you to organisations who have taken the time to brief MSPs ahead of this debate today, including the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, Ofgem, Smart Energy GB, Age Scotland and the Citizens Advice Bureau. With the scale of the task before energy suppliers, I share the Housing Federation's concern that they do not have the capacity to switch all RTS consumers for whom a smart meter will be appropriate by the 30th of June deadline. Those who are still using a radio teleswitch service come the 30th of June can be negatively affected both financially and in their day-to-day lives. Without the ability to control their heating and hot water, many could be left without both, and others will be left with their heating turned on more than they would choose to, incurring a cost they cannot and shouldn't have to afford. For those who do have a new meter installed in the next 6 weeks, Citizens Advice Scotland report that some will need to rewire or relocate it in order to successfully install it, which could include other costs. The SFHA shares CAS's concerns and have highlighted that consumers might face higher energy bills due to changes in their tariffs available to them or as a result of inaccurate information provided by their supplier. With a significant number of RTS metres in housing association properties, this is an understandable and significant concern of the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations, and I'm proud to voice that on behalf of them today. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, I simply ask all energy providers to make increasing the number of installation appointments and contacting customers who have not switched over an urgent priority between now and the 30th of June. I'd further ask the Scottish Government to request regular updates from energy providers on the progress they're making to get the number of customers in Scotland still using RTS down to zero by 30th of June. And in particular, ask how many of these customers are on the Priority Services Register. Financial support must be put in place for residents who incur costs through needing to install a new meter through no fault of their own, and energy suppliers should automatically compensate customers whose meters are not replaced before the deadline and who face increased bills as a result of having to use more expensive heating alternatives. So whilst I accept that RTS has come to the end of its operational life, I can't accept that energy suppliers could not have been more prepared ahead of the 30th of June deadline. It's likely to be the hardest to reach in our communities who will struggle the most, and those who are digitally excluded and living in fuel poverty, or those who live alone. So, Deputy Presiding Officer, there's not much time left until the RTS switch off, and we as MSPs should do everything that we can between now and the 30th of June to ensure affected constituents are supported financially and practically to replace their meters. And I'd like to say thank you again to Beatrice Wishart for securing this debate, bringing focus to this important issue. And I look forward to updates from energy suppliers on how they plan to ensure the 22,579 people in the region I represent still using RTS will be switched over by the 30th of June. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Duncan Glancy. And I call Emma Harper to be followed by Rachel Hamilton. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Beatrice Wishart for bringing this members' debate to Chamber this evening. The member has outlined extremely well the problems which will cause for her constituents in the northern rural Shetland Islands, and that's something that I'm going to highlight in the South West, in Dumfries and Galloway and the Scottish borders. Beatrice Wishart has highlighted the radio teleswitch switch off and what it means in terms of the operational end of life of the equipment, and then how that will affect some meters between the peak and off-peak rates of payment, and how that will affect consumers in terms of their energy bills. Presiding Officer, the BBC has first outlined their plans for closure of the long-wave broadcast in 2011. Over a year ago, Radio 4 discontinued their long-wave opt-outs. Another year before that, they began running down opt-out programming on longwave. Extension after extension to the cut-off has been put in place over the years, in large part to allow the distribution companies the time that they claimed they needed to switch over the RTS meters. And now here we are 14 years on and only 6 weeks from the longwave switch-off, and the most recent numbers that I have for Dumfries and Galloway are over 7,500 households and over 6,000 in the Scottish borders. They're at risk of cessation of the service or sky-high bills once the switch happens. And one of the questions I was asking was, how does a consumer know that they have an RTS meter? Well, do they have a separate box near the meter with a radio switch label on it? Is their property heated using electricity or storage heaters? Is there no mains gas supply near? And that would be about 40% of rural Dumfries and Galloway homes. And I would ask constituents if their energy is cheaper at different times of the day, like Economy 7 tariff, Economy 10 or Total Heat Control. And if persons are unsure, they need to contact their energy supplier. And just as we saw with the spike in energy prices a few years ago, it is householders and bill payers who will have to bear the consequence of the energy industry squeezing them from every penny and refusing to invest in the staff and capacity to switch the meters. And the UK-controlled regulator in Ofgem, who haven't so much as taken their eye off the ball, but they've kicked it through the nearest window. And I know the engineers will be working flat out to do what they can, but we have heard real concerns from the people who actually work with the householders day to day. And we've heard from Citizens Advice Scotland and Age Concern about some of the problems that they have faced, like some of the suppliers that they need to do more to increase the number of engineer appointments, but then there's challenges even securing engineer visits, and even once they do, are the appointments actually being honoured? We've had people being told that they needed to replace their meters with smart meters, or a smart meter might not even be appropriate, but then they're offering no alternative. So Presiding Officer, I know time is approaching the 4-minute mark, but 14 years to prepare, 6 weeks to go, and here we are. This process sums up UK energy policy in a nutshell: short-termist, deregulated, head in the sand, last minute, profit maximising and shareholder dividends protected off the backs of consumers. So I would like to ask the Scottish Government to do all it can to support consumers ahead of this fast approaching June 30 deadline. We need regulatory updating yesterday rather than in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Harper. I now call Rachel Hamilton to be followed by Ariane Burgess. Up to 4 minutes, Ms Hamilton.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to Beatrice Wishart for bringing forward this very important debate on an issue that is growing in urgency with each passing day. Scheduled to end in weeks, the switch-off is not just a technical adjustment. It's a looming crisis for thousands of households across Scotland, and particularly for those in rural areas like my constituency in the Borders. It's clear that rural communities are being disproportionately affected. As of early April 2025, it's estimated that there are approximately 5,000 households in the Scottish Borders still using the RTS electricity meters, and many of those homes rely on RTS meters to regulate their heating and hot water, and often using legacy electric storage systems and off-peak tariffs such as Total Heat, Total Control. These homes are frequently off-grid in hard-to-reach areas, and they have affected elderly people or vulnerable residents. While urban areas have greater infrastructure for swift meter replacement, rural households, as we know, face barriers in accessing appointments, resolving technical issues and receiving timely follow-ups. In these communities, delays don't just mean inconvenience, they mean cold homes and unaffordable bills. Presiding Officer, a further concern, in my opinion, is the lack of clear and widespread communication from Ofgem and suppliers. Many people have not received adequate information about the RTS switch-off and what it actually means for them. And even where communication has been issued, it's been vague and it's been overly technical, and it's simply too late. This has left constituents confused about whether they're going to be affected, what action they need to take and how to get support. For such a significant national transition, the failure to communicate effectively is simply unacceptable. The real impact of the issue is being felt behind closed doors across the Borders. One elderly constituent from Duns is 97, blind and profoundly deaf, and has been left in limbo whilst his family has tried since February to secure a replacement RTS meter. Despite repeated attempts and communication with the energy supplier, they have received only mixed messages and no confirmed date for the meter replacement. My constituent now faces the real risk of disruption to heating and hot water and entirely avoidable stress. And yes,
Emma Harper, briefly.
I thank Rachel Hamilton for giving way. Rachel Hamilton has just highlighted the challenges that some really vulnerable people are seeing, especially a 97-year-old person in Duns. Does she agree that there's going to be many other constituents that are really vulnerable that will be facing the same issues?
Rachel Hamilton.
I thank Emma Harper for the intervention, and I think that's why it's so important that Beatrice Wishart has brought forward this debate, and I'm hoping that this will be almost an awareness campaign for those who haven't actually understood what is required of them. So another constituent based in Coldingham received a replacement smart meter in December after her original RTS meter failed. Despite this, technical issues persisted. Her new meter is still not sending readings to her supplier, and months of chasing emails and phone calls have brought no resolution. And with no accurate billing and no clear fix in sight, this constituent remains stuck in a broken system. These examples show that the problems are not just about replacing meters, but about ensuring they work properly and that suppliers provide accountable, timely support. The transition to smart meters should be an opportunity to modernise and improve energy access, but it's being mishandled. Constituents are being moved onto unsuitable tariffs, facing connectivity issues and encountering long waits for engineers. To conclude, Presiding Officer, we cannot let vulnerable people and rural communities, like the people in the Borders that I've given the examples of today, bear the brunt of this national failure. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hamilton. I now call Ariane Burgess to be followed by Christine Graham. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Burgess.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I too wish to thank Beatrice Wishart for bringing this important and urgent debate to the Chamber this evening. I speak on behalf of my constituents in the Highlands and Islands, many of whom are deeply concerned about the looming switch-off of the radio teleswitch services RTS and the very real risks it poses to their well-being. This is not just a technical transition, it's a decision made in Westminster with little regard for the unique challenges faced by rural and island communities in Scotland. And it is our most vulnerable residents, older people, low-income households and social housing tenants who are being left to bear the brunt. As of April this year, there were still over 390,000 RTS meters in use across Great Britain. Given the low uptake of smart meters in Scotland, particularly in the Northern and Western Isles, where fewer than 10% of households have one, it is fair to assume that a disproportionate number of these meters are in my region. One constituent of mine waited 9 months for a resolution that came only after his energy supplier was forced to prove that the data communications company, that all other options had failed before they were allowed to install a cellular system. Other constituents have only seen action from their energy companies after I, and I'm sure my colleagues across the chamber, have contacted them on their behalf. That is not a system working for people. That is a system failing them. The Scottish Federation of Housing Associations has raised urgent concerns. Many of their members report that energy suppliers simply do not have the capacity to replace all RTS meters by the 2025 deadline. Worse still, they are not engaging proactively with tenants for whom a smart meter is not a viable option. And what happens after the switch, as others have said tonight? Some tenants are being moved onto tariffs that are more expensive or unsuitable, often without clear information or consent. Citizens Advice Scotland has already seen cases of people falling into energy debt because their new smart meters don't work properly. And this is not just inconvenient, it's pushing people into poverty. Presiding Officer, we need urgent assurances from Ofgem and the UK Government that no tenant will be penalised for the inaction or delays of energy companies. There is a robust, fully funded plan to support those affected, especially those who lose heating or hot water, and that no one will be left in the cold because of a failure to consult or prepare. This is a matter of energy justice. It's about ensuring that the very transition to smart technology does not leave behind the very people who need the most support. And I urge colleagues across the chamber to stand up, as they have said they will, for our rural and island communities and demand a fair, inclusive and properly resourced transition.
Thank you, Ms Burgess. I now call Christine Graham to be followed by Alexander Burnett. Up to 4 minutes. Ms Graham.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I congratulate the member on securing this debate, to which I was a signatory. Much has been said about smart meters and often about their unreliability. By the end of June, as we've said, the existing radio teleswitch service, RTS, which may connect to your meter, is being switched off. And now I take myself and my head into the uncomfortable area for me of technology. Here we go. The difference between Scotland, the north of England and the south is this. In the Midlands, Wales and southern England, all meters use cellular technology similar to mobile phones to send data to energy providers. In the north of England and Scotland, it's different. So I say to Tim Eagle, it's the same in the north of England. Here, as in the north of England, will be a radio signal, but long range. So what I don't understand is why a current radio teleswitch service is being replaced with another long-range radio signal when the current signal is switched off at the end of June. In Scotland, smart meters will run on this new radio signal and not on the public internet or Wi-Fi. I hope so far so good, because my head's already burning. What is that impact? Currently, over 6,000 in the Borders have yet to switch. In Midlothian, over 700. That's bad enough. Besides that, the impact on too many of my constituents is that even if they want, they will not be able to connect to a smart meter system because they cannot receive this new radio signal because of their location. I have many constituents in this position, so Scottish Power, for example, have advised that it will install instead a white meter. They must change, because without a new meter, their heating and hot water will be affected. They may find they are always on or off, or the charging happens at the wrong time of day. Their electricity supply won't be able to confirm how much electricity they have used for heating and other electricity use, which means electricity costs could be much higher for them than before. Now, if your area has a poor signal, as I say, your supplier must still replace your RTS meter to ensure your heating is not disrupted. I'm back again in the technical maze, Deputy Presiding Officer. If you don't have a smart meter already and have currently an RTS meter, you may be on a tariff that charges you a different price for the electricity you use for your heating and hot water than you do for the rest of your electricity, like lighting and appliances. Some tariffs also offer lower rates at specific times of the day. Now, that's a good thing. But all changes after June. Without a new meter after June, as I've said, your heating and hot water will be affected. A smart meter would ensure your heating is not disrupted, but you can't have this. In the event it's not possible, then the provider, say Scottish Power, can install that white meter with your tariff pre-programmed. And I emphasise pre-programmed. You have to send in manual readings. You won't get the full benefits of a smart meter or any other kind of meter, but at least your heating will continue to work. The trouble is most white meters will charge a slightly higher daytime charge compared to a standard tariff, so it's very likely you'll end up paying a lot more. Which means that we end up beyond the technology to this fact. Scotland is doing badly out of this different system. In the event it's not possible to install a smart meter, then you're going to perhaps be paying more on this pre-programmed tariff. You have to be the kind of person who doesn't mind cooler water in the evenings. It will heat the most of your water at night and store it in a storage heater. So your hot water will be hot in the morning and coolest in the evening. But as I say, most of these will charge a higher tariff for your daytime usage, which many older people and disabled will use. So we end up with this technology, with too many of my constituents having to opt for a metering system, which is more expensive. This is a bitter pill when the wind turbines around you are producing 4 times more electricity than the south of Scotland uses, endure a landscape of pylons, but you pay more for the electricity generated on your very doorstep. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Graham. We now come to the final speaker in the open debate, Alexander Burnett. Up to 4 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I start by thanking Beatrice Wishart for bringing this motion to debate. As we've heard in the Chamber, the closure of the radio teleswitch service on the 30th of June is fast approaching. And I've heard from many constituents who have experienced issues and delays with having meters exchanged and should declare an interest, as this includes myself. It was reported that at the end of April there were still 432,000 metres needed to be replaced in the UK, over a quarter of which, nearly 135,000, are located in Scotland, and it's been estimated that the rate of replacement is about 6,000 a month. I therefore echo the concerns raised by other members that meters are not being replaced at a rate that will meet the deadline. It will in fact take 6 years at this rate to complete. Now, many people have had to wait months for an appointment, and for many rural households who are total heating, total control customers, the changeover to a smart meter has been a lot more complex and timely, adding further to these delays. I've had constituents whose smart meter installations have failed over 3 times due to the wiring of their homes, and this lengthy process is very worrying given the number of homes still to be connected. I have worked with one elderly vulnerable constituent who lives by herself to try and chase up her installation, but months in, she still hasn't got an appointment. I've also heard from constituents who have experienced poor communication about the RTS switch-off, and so there's an additional concern that some households may not even be aware that the switch-off is taking place. And in fact, a poll by Age Scotland shows nearly over half of people needing a switchover are still not aware. It is simply not good enough. And so it is of great concern that those who still need to have their smart meters installed face the possibility of losing hot water and heating or having their bills skyrocket to unaffordable heights. So whilst technological upgrades are necessary and the switchover will ultimately make bills more accurate, we must not let rural communities be left at a disadvantage. But whether it's improvements to broadband or energy in our homes, our rural communities are always the last to benefit from upgrades. So I'd be very interested to hear what the conversations this SNP government have had with the UK Labour government on this matter to ensure that all properties will be upgraded by the deadline and that rural homes are not left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Burnett. I now invite Gillian Martin to respond to the debate. Cabinet Secretary, up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I want to begin by thanking Beatrice Wishart, as others have done, for bringing this hugely important issue to Parliament today. And members will know that energy infrastructure is reserved to the UK Government. The actions of suppliers are regulated by Ofgem, as I think everyone has said. And this means the Scottish Government has got extremely limited powers to intervene, but this does not mean that we are not communicating. I've got a page full of the times in which Ministers, Deputy First Minister, Minister for Climate Action and myself have engaged with Ofgem on all all the issues that have been mentioned in this debate and will continue to do so. I particularly thank when Pam Duncan Glancy asked me to make that pledge. I think as a result of this debate, there's some things that I'm going to cover in the debate for which I thought we had certainty, but I'm not sure that that has been communicated, so I think I have to go back to them, or Dr Allen has to go back to them again to get some confirmation. We're taking this issue extremely seriously and playing our full proper part in raising awareness to protect households. I will, yes.
Rachel Hamilton.
I didn't get to this part of my speech. Thank you for taking the intervention. But some of the remedial works are not being covered. Would it be possible for the Scottish Government to recognise that it is something they could possibly help with regards to their responsibilities around fuel poverty?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, as I said, it is the Ofgem's responsibility, and of course the responsibility to replace the meters is actually down with the energy companies as well. But we've actually called for certain protections to be put in place, and I'm going to outline some of them in my speech, and hopefully will be of help to Ms Hamilton. First, the outstanding meter upgrades is just completely unacceptable. I mean, Ofgem and the companies that have to replace these meters have known for years that this is going to happen, and we make this view clear every opportunity. The Minister for Climate Action, Alistair Allen, wrote to the UK Government seeking penalties on suppliers who fail to replace RTS with smart meters, whether fully functional or pre-programmed for June this year. And I am pleased to say that Ofgem has listened and will, once refreshed licence conditions are in place, take compliance action against suppliers who fail to take reasonable steps to upgrade meters in time. However, and this is where I am a little bit nervous, because I have heard today, and I've indeed heard from my own constituencies, we hear examples of people trying to arrange a meter upgrade but without success, or thinking that they have arranged an upgrade and engineers not turning up, or engineers turning up that are insufficiently trained to upgrade the meter in question, or as Elena Witham says, turning up and really being surprised by what they find in front of them and then not knowing what to do. This is absolutely unacceptable, and this can't be a loophole for anyone to say, oh, we made reasonable steps. You know, I had heard from one person that they were on the phone thinking that they were arranging for someone to come round and change over their meter. But then when they were asked about parking and access to their home, there was all of a sudden a problem, because they would need 2 engineers and they would phone back, and they never phoned back. So what's actually in the reporting mechanism to say? Is it going to say that we made attempts? Well, they made an attempt and then they didn't phone back, and the work's not done. So the Data Communication Company, or DCC as I'll refer to them from now on, controls the digital energy infrastructure for Great Britain, collects and shares that smart meter data with energy suppliers via the Wide Area Network, or WAN. And I agree with Beatrice Wishart that it is wholly unfair that significant swathes of Scotland have been unable to connect to this smart meter network. And we believe that penalties should also be applied to the DCC for failing to deliver coverage across every part of the country. Now, I mentioned in my intervention to Tim Eagle that, and what I meant to say is that in areas in which we did not have coverage, we have been calling for the use of cellular to access the smart meter network in Scotland, and Christine Graham mentioned that as well in her speech. And I understand that from Energy UK that agreement has now been reached to allow this, supporting many more rural and island customers to access the WAN network. And obviously, members are welcome that in the 4G infill programme, we've invested to proactively address poor network coverage in this area, and we've activated 55 4G masts, as I mentioned in my intervention, to fill in these gaps as well. But I was also pleased that Pam Duncan Glancy took part in the debate from an urban perspective, because it makes the point that it's not just the areas that maybe have connectivity problems that have an issue here. It is the lack of engineers going out. There is no problems with connectivity, digital connectivity in Glasgow, to my knowledge, yet there's still issues with people getting the smart meters installed there. Ariane Burgess, Pam Duncan Glancy, Emma Harper and many others mentioned it should be a given that nobody becomes financially worse off as a result of the switchover. Now, I was going to say that I'm pleased that our calls for suppliers to be mandated to take all reasonable steps to provide a tariff that leaves the customer, quote, no worse off than their existing arrangements have been heeded. We have been told that this is going to happen. But today I'm hearing from members that there is doubt about that. And I am actually going to take this away from this debate to make sure that we are getting the right information. And if we are getting the right information, that has to be communicated to members, and it has to be communicated to the many... yes, I will.
Christine Graham, briefly.
Wrong button. Taking all reasonable steps to ensure they're no worse off, does that mean they should have a discount on their bill if, because of the examples I've given, white metering means that you're going to be paying more than you paid before in the old metering system, that there should be a discount on their bill looking at previous bills that they've had?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, in my reading of mandated to take all reasonable steps to provide a tariff that leaves the customer no worse off is exactly what Christine Graham has just outlined. But I am going to take away the testimony of all of the members today just to test that with the Ofgem and indeed it would be with the suppliers. It's also unacceptable to expect customers to pay for the expensive rewiring, and I've heard of that happening in a few issues that didn't really get mentioned today, but actually people having a bill associated with that. Too many consumers are already in energy and other consumer debt due to the cost of living crisis, and they shouldn't be having to deal with any additional anxieties as a result of a decision that's not theirs. Yes, I will.
Briefly, Rachel Hamilton.
Cabinet Secretary, that when I meant remedial works, I meant the rewiring. That's what I was talking about.
Right.
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'll tell you what we have done is we've asked for a fund to support consumers in their position. And we've called on Ofgem, the UK Government and industry to make urgent progress. I think that was Dr Allen that wrote more recently about that. I'm not entirely sure what response he's had to date, and maybe is in the works. I want to say a few words on resilience planning. This could have a profound impact on some of our public services as well, and I want to reassure Parliament we're working across government with suppliers and the regulator to plan for any outcomes that would affect our NHS, our local authorities and our public services. The Scottish Government will play its full and proper part in any resilience planning and response, but I do want to assure the Chamber that I have heard everyone loud and clear about the confusion that still reigns about this. I think that Rachel Hamilton made an absolutely fundamental point. It has been failure to communicate effectively that has been at the root of quite a lot of these problems. Consumers are left confused, and then once they get over the confusion, they go out of their way to try and arrange things, and they're not being served particularly well. So I will take all of this away. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes the debate, and I close this meeting of Parliament.